What's up, everyone? Today we are digging into how we practice in odd time signatures. Now, this is probably not the number one most important rhythmic thing that you develop in your playing. However, if you want to engage with the entire pantheon of the modern jazz vernacular, being able to play in some odd time signatures is an essential skill to have in your toolkit. Before we jump into our exercises for this week, I would be remiss if I did not encourage you to check out my band Paper Canaries' new EP. It just dropped a couple weeks ago. I've been really promoting it a lot on different social media platforms, so if you follow me there, you might have found it. But it's available on all streaming platforms. It's available here on YouTube, and it actually features several tunes that have some odd meter stuff in them. The one that I want you to check out is the tune Big Brother. Stevie Wonder cover, my arrangement. We put it into 7. The etude that is available over in the virtual studio this week is that tune. It is my solo on that tune, and that is actually going to be free for everyone this week. Just so you can check it out with the recording. Not to say that I'm, the best odd meter player in the world. I enjoy playing in odd meters, but it's all about seeing how some of the exercises that we talk about today can sort of play out into the real world in a real musical situation rather than just in the practice room. So let's get into it. We're going to talk about 3 things you want to do to get started playing in odd meters. And that's what I want you to think about today's lesson is. This is some stuff that's going to help you get going on this. This is not necessarily the end place you want to be. These are going to be exercises that will get you started. If you have no experience with odd meters or you feel like odd meters are challenging for you, I was definitely in that boat. Odd meters never came super easy to me until I started practicing some of these sort of very foundational exercises. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to learn some rhythmic vocabulary that work in 7. We're going to be talking in 7/8 today mostly. Secondly, we're going to move some of that rhythmic vocabulary into a tune in some simple and clear ways. And then finally, we're going to talk about some ways you can maybe just be a little more organic, a little more musical with these elements. All right, so when we're starting with our rhythmic vocabulary, first of all, we've got to connect with that today. We are working in 7/8. And so for us, we are going to think of a 2-2-3 division of 7/8. So we get 1-2, 1-2, 1-2, 3. And more precisely, and I think what is really going to help you get in touch with the type of ideas that work best for us as improvisers is thinking that we have 1-2, 1-2, da, 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 da. So in the 3 part of the 7/4 bar, we're actually going to think of it more like 2/3. That can really help us get in touch with some good ideas and is going to be very similar to how maybe the rhythm section, at least when we're doing this sort of way of dividing 7, is going to work. To start with, we're going to use ideas that really emphasize the downbeat of 1 and that 2/3 aspect in the last half of the measure. These types of rhythms give us really good foundation to where the measure begins and where the measure ends. A lot of us, when we first start working on odd meters, you might find that you have a hard time knowing where you are just in the measure, and you can sort of lose track of where 1 is relatively easy, especially when you go to playing it in a real musical setting where the rhythm section may be sometimes obscuring where beat 1 is. So we need to have a lot of foundation with these very basic rhythms to know where beat 1 is. So what we're going to do, we're going to move this into a tune. So we're going to take the roots of each chord of a tune. We're going to use Autumn Leaves today because that's a very confident tune for most of us to sort of explore some of these concepts. And we're going to use some of these different rhythms, some of those examples I just played, and apply them to the roots. And we're going to use a metronome to start to make sure we're really on the money. Now, these very downbeat-oriented rhythms can start to feel very rigid and kind of stiff really, really quickly. So you've got to balance that with some rhythms that don't always start on the downbeat, and also rhythms that maybe obscure a little bit the second half of the measure, that 2/3 that we're looking for. From there, we're going to do the exact same exercise where we put those type of rhythms into the form of a tune, and I would advise to be with a metronome to start, so you really have to be accurate with those and you have sort of nowhere to hide or no support you're getting from a play along. Spending a fair amount of time on these sort of exercises is what's going to give you the confidence that even if you get a little bit off at some point in the tune, which is very likely when you're playing an odd meter, even myself and a lot of other, more experienced players than me, for example, when we're playing together and we're playing an odd meters, sometimes you just get a little off and you don't stress out about it. You just, listen for where the rhythm section is for a measure and then you can jump back on. But having a good foundation in these very sort of basic and foundational rhythms is what's going to give you the confidence to, if you do need to take a step back, you feel confident that you can jump right back in. Our second step in this process of getting started with our odd meter playing is moving some of these rhythms through the chord tones of our given song. Again, today we're working on Autumn Leaves, so we're going to move these through different chord tone exercises. We're not going to necessarily just go straight up an arpeggio or straight down an arpeggio. I would advise you to sort of move up and down arpeggios as you desire to freely. I will also add, if you do not have absolute control over playing basically only chord tones in 4/4 on a given tune, you got to start there. If you can't do that, it's going to be really difficult for you to do it in an odd time signature. So make sure you've invested enough time doing these foundational things in 4/4. But we're just going to move up and down through the arpeggio however we want to, trying to think about making little melodies, but using some of these fixed rhythmic vocabulary items that we just practiced. No surprises here. We're going to start with rhythms that are a little bit more downbeat oriented, and then we're going to move to rhythms that are a little less downbeat oriented and also that maybe obscure that 2/3 I talked about in the latter half of the bar. I'm going to move through these relatively quickly. I'm just going to play 2 A sections and I'm going to use 4 different rhythms. So I'm going to play 4 bars of one rhythm, 4 bars of the next rhythm, 4 bars of the next rhythm, and so on and so forth. We'll do that for the downbeat rhythms and then the same thing for the offbeat rhythms, just to kind of show you some different things you can do here and how you might want to move through this. If I was really practicing this, I would probably do almost an entire chorus or multiple choruses with one rhythm, really trying to get that instilled in my playing. Now, if you're doing that exercise and you're thinking about good voice leading, maybe thinking about how these arpeggio shapes actually can create small melodies, you're going to be really close to actually already sounding pretty decent playing in an odd time signature here. So the next step from there is to give yourself a little more freedom. Mix up your rhythms a little bit more. Maybe give yourself freedom to add a passing note or two in there. I wouldn't really worry about so much playing like full-on lines quite yet. I would really try to stick to arpeggios with passing notes as sort of the way you're making note choices and really focus more on, can I mix up rhythms? Finding a balance between, okay, sometimes I start on downbeats, sometimes I start on offbeats. Maybe you just intentionally say, I'm going to rest at the beginning of every bar and see where you can go from there. just to give yourself a little bit of sort of a task you have to complete. Remember, all this improvisation stuff is best practice through setting limitations on yourself that, okay, I can only play downbeats, or maybe I can play no downbeats of one. That is what will help get you there when you're trying to mix this stuff up. These exercises are 100% the exercises that I practice to get my odd time signature playing together. I didn't really start working on this till much later after college. I just wasn't quite there yet when I was in college to work on this sort of stuff. But once I became an adult musician, felt like my 4/4, 3/4 kind of playing was a little bit more under control. I wanted to get this aspect of my musicianship together, but it took a ton of practice on these very foundational things. It just felt that for me, just sort of going for it and trying to feel where the 7 or the 5 or the whatever was didn't really work for me without this foundation laying, because when I went to sort of combine the lines I wanted to play and the melodic ideas I had with the rhythms that were there, just nothing lined up and the chord tones didn't resolve in the right place and all that sort of stuff. So I just wasn't getting what I was looking for. So try investing some time in some of these things, see if they work for you. They will definitely be great rhythmic practice regardless, because if we can play really well in odd time signatures, it can sometimes help us to see other options or help us to strengthen our 4/4 time as well. Cool. We'll see you in the woodshed.